All right, we're going to continue with our mystery, but first, let's look at our I. We have the short I, blink, crisp. Our 3 ways to make the long I sound. I, consonant E, slice, pride, glide. We have just plain old Y, cry, fly, try. And then we have IGH, high, fight, height, and flight. All right, let's look at our vocabulary words. All right, so remember, mystery, something that needs to be solved, something puzzling that needs to be figured out. A custom, it's a way a certain group of people do things. Culture, the way a country does things. And then a prince. And I know we've read fairy tales about a princess, right? But this is a prince. And they do exist in real life. If you have a country that has a king and a queen, their son is called a prince. Their daughter would be called a princess, but in this case, Sammy is a boy, so he is a prince. All right, let's continue with chapter 3, The Kidnapped King by Ron Roy. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose stared at Sammy. "What do you mean? Who's going to dress you?" Dinks asked. "In my country, my servants dress me and undress me," Sammy said. Servants, those are people that wait on you for money or just for loyalty. "Yeah, right," Josh said, grinning. "And my servants do my homework for me." "Do you really have servants?" Ruth Rose asked Sammy. Sammy nodded. "I have 5 servants of my own. My father has 20. 20 servants, Josh yelled. "Are you guys rich?" Sammy sat on Dink's bed. "We are very rich," he said. "My father is..." Sammy didn't finish what he was going to say. Instead, he burst into tears. Now, I need to self-monitor here for a minute. We know this doesn't really make sense. We know that Sammy is rich, and we know that he's come to live with an American family. And the kids are, they're being nice to him, so it doesn't make sense that he would just start to cry. So I guess we need to keep reading to find out why. "Great, Josh, you made him cry," Dink said. "I did not. I just asked him if he was rich." Ruth Rose sat next to Sammy. "Why are you crying?" she asked. Sammy didn't answer. Big tears rolled down his cheeks. Dink tossed the sweat clothes onto the bed. Then he came into the bathroom and came out with a wad of tissues. "Here," he said. Sammy took the tissues and wiped his eyes. "Do you miss your mom and dad?" Ruth Rose asked Sammy. "Is that why you're crying?" Sammy took a deep breath and wiped at his tears. "I don't know where my parents are," he said. "They were kidnapped last week." "Kidnapped?" the 3 other kids yelled. Sammy nodded. "My father's enemy snuck into the palace and took him and my mother." "Palace?" Josh said. "You live in a palace? What are you, a prince or something?" Sammy nodded. "My father is the king of Kostra. I am Prince Samir Ben Oz. I will be king someday." And here they are in Dink's room. Okay, you can tell Ruth Rose doesn't want Sammy to cry. We've got Dink and Josh, and here's Loretta. Okay, and so we just learned some very interesting things. We just finally found out that he is the prince. Okay, he is royalty. Let's continue. Sammy started crying again. No one said anything. Even Loretta stopped running around in her cage. Dink stared at Sammy. "You're a prince?" he said finally. "Does my mom know all this, Sammy? About your folks being kidnapped and everything?" The boy shook his head. "Only my tutor knows," he said. "My parents were kidnapped at night. I was sleeping. The next day I was snuck out of the palace and sent here so I would be safe." "Safe from what?" Ruth Rose asked. Sammy looked at her. His eyes were red and his nose dripped. "From the kidnappers," he said. Just then, Pal started barking from the front porch. "They're here!" Sammy cried. He jumped off the bed and ran to the bathroom. Dink looked out the window. Pal was barking at a car. It was a taxi. Dink watched it turn the corner and disappear. "Come on out, Sammy," Dink said. "It was just your tutor leaving." Sammy stepped out of the bathroom. His eyes looked scared. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "No problem," Dink said. "Why don't we go down and play?" He pointed to the sweat clothes on the bed. "Do you really need help getting dressed?" Sammy took a deep breath and grinned. "No, I am in America now. I will learn to dress myself." while Sammy changed and the other kids went outside and tossed a Nerf ball in Dink's backyard. It must be so cool to be a prince, Josh said. Just imagine ordering all those servants around. Dink bopped him on with the Nerf ball. Josh, Sammy doesn't care about all that stuff, he said. He misses his parents. I know, Josh said, but still, think. He could get ice cream in the middle of the night by snapping his fingers. Sammy came out dressed in Dink's sweat clothes. Pal, tied to a tree, tried to lick Sammy's foot as he walked by. Sammy jumped out of reach. Is he trying to bite me, he asked. Josh laughed. Nah, he's just saying hi, he said. Pal wouldn't hurt a flea. Go ahead, pet him. Sammy stepped closer and gave Pal a pat on his head. Then he sneezed. I like him, Sammy said, but I am still allergic. The kids taught Sammy the rules to touch football. They played until Dink's mother called them in to eat. Promising to come over the next morning, Josh untied Pal and headed for home. Bye, Sammy, Ruth Rose said. She cut through the hedge to her house next door. A hedge is like a bush. Your friends are nice, Sammy said. Do you play together every day? Sure, Dink said. Don't you play with your friends in that place you come from? Sammy shook his head. I have no friends. I stay in the palace and study with my tutors. No friends? Dink stared at Sammy. He couldn't imagine not having Josh and Ruth Rose to hang out with. We better go wash up, Dink said, looking at his dirty hands. I hope you like burgers and fries. Burgers and fries, Sammy said. What is burgers and fries? He grinned. Hamburgers and French fries. French fries are skinny little potato slices. You dip them in ketchup. Sammy let out a sigh. Okay, I will try your food. Who will taste it for me? Taste it, Dink asked. Why? In my country, Sammy explained, my father's enemies sometimes try to poison him. He has a servant taste our food to make sure it's safe. Dink grinned at Sammy. My mom's a real good cook. She doesn't use much poison at all. Sammy's eyes bugged out. You are making joke, right? Yeah, Dink said. But we have to tell the truth about you, okay? Why? Sammy asked. Because it's the way we do things, Dink said. Don't worry. You'll be safe here. Nobody will get you in Greenlawn. Remember, Greenlawn's the town that they all live in right now. So Sammy wants somebody to taste his food because that's part of the custom he's had to grow up with, is that he lives in an area that seems like it's a little dangerous, and there's always people trying to get to him or get to his parents, and obviously they did get to his parents, and that's why they were kidnapped. And so he's used to having a servant taste their food for him. That's a very risky job for that servant, because if the food is poisoned, then the servant just got poisoned. So it's not necessarily a job that I would want to have. But anyway, we'll read more of our story tomorrow. Thanks for listening.